What were some of the biggest overall trends in cybercrime this year, especially as regards breaches and vulnerabilities? What were the main areas that XM was focused on?
Yeah, 2022 was a weird year. We had a lot of weird, high-profile vulnerabilities. Think about Log4j, Spring4Shell, Felina. So there was a lot of really high-profile vulnerabilities where, if I think back, most of the time I feel like there would always be like one big one a year. And for whatever reason, this year had a lot of them. So within breach and attack simulation, within what we do with attack path management at XM, really focus on trying to see like, how can this new vulnerability introduce risk or be operationalized by an attacker to put your critical assets at risk. So that definitely played a lot with it. We have a lot of organizations really assessing the whole stuff that's going on in Ukraine and Russia, trying to evaluate like, hey, we have a sizable workforce over in Ukraine. What is the risk to our critical assets, maybe somewhere else in the world from Ukraine or from Russia? And then being able to simulate like, let's run through some simulation saying, okay, of all of the people that we have in the Ukraine, if they were an insider threat or their account gets compromised or an entity of theirs gets compromised, is there any risk to maybe some sort of critical asset holding intellectual property sitting maybe here in the States? So there's been a lot of questions around that, especially with XM. They're saying, I want to run a scenario where all of my workforce in Ukraine is all compromised. And then what happens and what risk is introduced and what are ways that they're able to get to my critical assets? So that's another one. Third-party risk was a really big one as well. You think about like a lot of the different breaches that we had with SolarWinds, Gaia, trying to figure out like, okay, how do I, as a security team, prevent these type of things from happening? Like we're deploying SolarWinds, and how am I supposed to be able to assess how secure these solutions are or the risks that I'm introducing of these solutions that they're deploying? So assessing cyber risk from a third-party perspective is also a really big one. The last two ransomware attacks, everyone's talking about ransomware attacks. And I feel like
ransomware,
a good 90% of all the POCs that I have going on right now say, hey, one of the scenarios I want to simulate is a ransomware attack. I want to see what happens in my environment and how prone I am to be hardened against a ransomware attack, or maybe the opposite. And then the last one is vulnerability prioritization. I think we now have seen that. I think I was looking at the CVE totals for this year. Again, they went up pretty much every single year. We have more and more. I think we're 23,000 vulnerabilities for 2022. It's just impossible for teams to actually patch and remediate and track all these anymore. So prioritizing these efforts, figuring out a real way to address vulnerabilities in organization without just scanning everything, taking kind of account, saying like, hey, we have 4,000 instances of Log4j that are vulnerable. And then like you have the board and executives saying like, well, what does that mean? Like, is this put us at risk? Like, can you put this into more terms that I can understand? Don't just tell me how many instances we have of it. So I think 2022 those were all the big ones that I can think of. But I'm sure there's so many others that it was just a fun world. I think another big one was we had a lot of people returning from remote workforces coming back into the offices. So we're now starting to shift ways that we have implemented, like maybe zero trust in different network environments, and maybe shifting them around a little bit. And maybe instead of doing zero trust, maybe introducing more like micro, macro segmentation and adopting different technologies and strategies like that, where, hey, we didn't have a chance to try that out 2 years ago because everyone was distributed and working from home. But now that we have a better understanding of it, now we're going to see if all of these things that we've been designing over the last 2 years actually work for all of our workforce that are back in the office.
How about some free cybersecurity training resources for you and your team? Just go to infosecinstitute.com/free to get ebooks, training guides, and more than 100 cybersecurity training courses, all free for CyberWork listeners. Go to infosecinstitute.com/free and start learning crucial new skills today.